So it's really good to be with you, with so many people. And so we're going to look at children in church. And I think I want to pay tribute actually to a URC minister, the Reverend John Sutcliffe, who a long time ago possibly first coined the term all-age worship. He was the minister of a church in St Albans, and I remember going to a lecture that he gave where he commended all-age worship, which happened in his church every week in the round. And he said pretty well, if you don't do this, you're finished. And the audience was horrified. But I think in many ways, he was saying something that really mattered. And it hit me like a bullet in the chest, really, and changed the way I thought of everything. So I want to attribute a great deal of what I say to him. And I will quote from a book that he was very involved in writing. Okay, so, oh dear, how do we go down? Ah, there we go. So let's think about an under 5, and this is a little boy, let's call him Toby. And this is his world. He's spotted something and it is a great fascination. And play is his world. So he looks and he copies and he plays with what he sees. Play is his work. It's what he needs to do. It's what he does most of the time. And he needs people to play with him. And wherever he is, the whole community needs to engage with him if he wants to engage with them. It's what we heard to begin with about the congregation, the community really matter. They matter to him. He doesn't realise that he's a child among a whole lot of people who think the church is theirs. He's just a person who's there and he wants to engage, but it's through play that he will engage. So listen to this. This is from a wonderful book called To Dance with God. Some years ago, I spent an afternoon caught up with a piece of sewing. The wastebasket was filled with scraps of fabric, which were a fascination to my daughter, who was then not yet 4 years old. She collected some long, bright strips and went off. When I checked on her, she was in the garden, sitting on the grass with a long pole to which she was attaching the bright strips of fabric with great lumps of sticky tape. I'm making a banner for a procession, she said. I need a procession so that God will come down and dance with us. Here's a wonderful picture of a child at play, working out their experience of worship. Now, people have studied and written about this. And so from the child dancing in the garden, let's just do a bit of theory. And this is from a book called How Faith Grows. You can still get it on Amazon as a second-hand copy, and it's worth a look. So first of all, we think about really tiny children, babies, and those in their first, well, say, couple of years of life. And we think about them as having something that is described as primal faith. This lovely sentence, we're loved into knowing and feeling as we're loved into being. So for this child, life is chaotic and intuitive, and that is how their faith is. Her ultimate environment is composed of a cloud made up of a collage of images and beliefs derived from her own imagination, from stories, and from her first experience of the outside world. But for the child who is involved in the church, in worship, The powerful symbols of Christian liturgy and belonging will contribute deep and lasting images. Young children who are excluded from worship because they don't yet understand may be being cut off from a vital form of nourishment. So having children in the church, among a congregation, among the people of faith, is really important. And the impact of this on their faith is the responsibility of the whole congregation. So let's have a look at something from the Roots resources. And this is from the adult and all age resources. It's not from the Children and Young People magazine. And the examples I've used have all come from the January-February issue of Roots. So this is Epiphany 2. The theme is Come, See and Hear, and the reading is John 1. So here's a gathering exercise. And if we're going to gather for worship, and we're going to have everybody present, then we have to have little people as well as big people, articulate people as well as less articulate people. So here's a gathering activity. It was very noisy at the dinner table. So the youngest child took a spoon, rapped loudly on the table and said, "Everyone speak up one at a time and me first." Someone has come up with an idea that could involve everybody. So here's the suggestion for the activity. Most people like to be listened to, so form small groups and ask each person in turn to say their name and their favourite colour. Now you can do that by the time you have language at, well, 2.5, possibly younger. And so while this is happening, the instruction says start playing from Joseph's chorus of the amazing colour Dreamcoat about the list of colours. And then ask one person in each group to say aloud the names and favourite colours of everybody. So while they're listening, they have to listen to the music and listen to everybody else speaking and see how they get on. It may be that a little person might do that better than an older person because they focus in a different sort of way. And then ask the speakers if the exercise was easy or hard and why and so on. So that's a gathering exercise, but it could be done with a really mixed age group, and little people can be as involved in that as everybody else. So inclusion really matters, and we have to be very creative to make sure that we can do that, but it's vital. Let's listen to what Jesus says. People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant, and he said to them, "Let the children come to me, do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms and laid his hands on them and blessed them. And I love this picture. It's very old. It's German, from one of the Cranach painters. So ancient and yet so tenderly portrayed, but it's very inspiring for us, I think. Jesus says even more powerfully in Matthew's Gospel, when people came to ask him who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, he called a child whom he put among them and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." These are tough words, and we often try and explain them away. But if we don't explain them away, if we take them seriously, then we will revolutionize the way that children's faith can develop and grow. In 1976, almost 50 years ago, the British Council of Churches, as it was then, today it's CTBI, produced a powerful and puzzlingly overlooked report called The Child in the Church. This was another thing that inspired me. Here is its heart. Children are a gift to the church. The Lord of the church sets them in the midst of the church, not as objects of benevolence, but as patterns of discipleship. The church that does not accept children unconditionally into its fellowship is depriving those children of what is rightfully theirs. But the deprivation such a church itself will suffer is far more grave. So if we're to be truly concerned about children and their faith development, then we must put the child in the midst. Children have a place in the pew or on a chair, inside the very church, experiencing worship and praise. There is a place for a creche and for a place where children might do something intensively with someone who will do it for them. But to be in the church, to be on your knee, switching in and out of what happens is really key and critical. The church needs to be a place where their voice can be heard among others, rather like that gathering exercise that we saw. So let's just think for a few seconds about our current predicament. Because as we worship at home, this community support is going to be very hard to access. Screens don't serve fellowship feeling very well, and that's what's really important for these children. And they don't serve young children well. We all know that if we have a family conversation and young children are present, they find it really quite hard with a Zoom call. They switch in and out. They're quite soon distracted. They find it hard to concentrate for that long. So we maybe need not to say we'll include our children in our Zoom worship, but we'll deliberately try to supply alternatives. And that might be where the creche option that I'm going to talk about later is a really helpful suggestion for now. Creche at home might sound a bit odd, but it's probably the best way to address what we can do at the moment. And if that takes up all the time and energy of parents because they can't watch a Zoom worship or take part in Zoom worship and keep tiny children engaged, then maybe we need to think of ways that we can deliver helpful things to these people at this time. And think what might be needed to undertake activities that they can do at home that offer the same sort of worship opportunity. Okay, let's stop there and then we'll think a bit later about some practical examples. So we're looking at in the church and the way that the Roots resources can help us. And I said that looking at ideas that you might use in a creche might actually be really quite helpful to us at the moment where we're having to do things at home. So let's just revisit the tiny children. So play is their world. This little boy, he'll go all over that grass and find things that interest him. He might put them in his pocket or he might ask a grown-up to keep them. And he'll keep getting them out and explore them again and again. But of course, he needs people to help that. And then the little girl that we heard about who just thought about what happened in church and then made her own thing. She found her own things to make her own procession with. And we think about what their faith is like. It's chaotic, it's intuitive, and it's made up of all sorts of images. It's not organized in any sort of way. So then let's have a look at the resources for the week of Epiphany. Go and search the story of the wise men. So the account of the wise men involves searching And if we just go back to the picture of the little boy on the grass, he will go and do his own searching. No one needs to say to him, Toby, go down and find the conkers or find the cobwebs. He'll do that because that's what he does. So let's have a look at ways in which we can supply those sort of activities for these children. So here we have some suggestions. Play a hide and seek game. Invite someone to volunteer and stand outside while everyone else watches you hide the image of Jesus. Then when the person comes back in, explain that they're looking for Jesus. And if the children are old enough, you can do the warm and cold thing. They might, if they're very tiny, they might need a grown-up to help them. But it's a game, it's play, and you can do it whether you're 2 or whether you're 5 or indeed whether you're 7 or whatever. And here's another one, hunt the stars. Just hide star decorations around the room and get children to hunt for them. So you can do that at home. You could do it in a creche, clearly, but neither of these things is really impossible to do it at home. So let's have a look. And then dressing up. It would be hard to do this in church at the moment because obviously, you know, we're not allowed to share things, but you could do it at home really easily. And why not grown-ups dress up as well as children? We need to do things together. And we were talking earlier about how children can help to lead worship. And actually singing is a really good way of doing that. Somebody referred to the Peruvian Gloria, saying the children liked it. But actually children could be the people who lead the Peruvian Gloria. And then everybody else replies to them. I'm just sort of throwing that in. But we don't need adults to lead simple things like that. Children can do that perfectly well. So dressing up. We can just take time to dress up and explore and think about how we want to be dressed up and what a king might like to wear and so on. And then walking round. You can walk round your flat, you can walk round your garden. It doesn't really matter where you are. And once we've learnt the chorus of We Three Kings, then we have it forever, really. So it's a simple thing to learn. There's not a lot of it, but once you've done that, you've got it for life. And then there's the story thing, and the Roots resources offer each week some particular resources for using with under 5s. And here's the story of the wise men laid out with the things that you would need to tell it. So some play figures, a little star, the crown, and so on. But you could do that at home. I mean, it was designed originally, this idea, for using in a creche or a little children's group. But this is something that could easily be done at home. It's the kind of thing that some people in a congregation could take those bags that we've talked about and put stuff together and take it to a family so that oh, excuse me, so that they have what they need, and then a parent or an older child can share the story. And once you've shared a story once, of course, for tiny children, they'd be happy to tell that story all week because they love the repetition. And you can leave the things out and they'll retell the story themselves whenever they want to. So it's not just something for Sunday then, it's something that might last all week or for a month or till Easter or forever. And then if we think about symbols, symbol is so important for these children. Their world is a world of symbol, actually. They develop an appreciation of symbol. They think symbolically long before they start to use verbal language. If you think of one of the very first things that a small child does once they can sit up. They point at things. They can't say the words, but they're pointing and identifying what they're seeing is an exercise in symbol, really. So within the Roots resources for this week, we have a couple of symbol type activities. So making stars sparkle. And indeed, the sparkle itself is a symbol. We don't need to explain it. It's just delightful. There's a bit of a thing about glitter now, and perhaps it's not all that green. And we may need to think about that. But the shiny paper, there's sequins and so on. So we don't need to explain that symbol. It just needs to be there, and we need to use it and enjoy it. And then I've mentioned this before, the Hunt the Stars. But you know, you can buy a packet of silver stars for next to nothing, really, and just take it and hide it. If you're at home, you could fill the house with stars, really, and you could look for them all week. And then, of course, singing is foundational to worship, and I've talked about that a little bit already. One of the features of the Roots under Fives resources that's new for January and onwards is that people have written little church songs to tunes that the children may well know, and the adults will know as well. So you're not trying to teach two things at once, some words and a tune that they've never heard. So this one, Welcome Back to Church this year with the Wheels on the Bus. If you need a friend in Jesus, to the tune of If You're Happy and You Know It. So that's really easy to do. And then if we want to hand it over to the children, they will create their own actions out of that. And we can do that in a creche, obviously, but it's a thing that families can do at home. And actually, if we explain to adults that we're going to do one song a week like this, maybe in a gathering part of the service, I think that not everybody, but quite a lot of people would go with that and understand it, really. And because they don't have to learn a new tune, they can cope with the words as well. And then if we look at the kind of thing that's possible within worship, within the pew, here's an idea where we introduce play into the kind of things we're doing. So the We Three Kings carol, we learn the chorus, we dress up, and we choose a person to carry a large star around the space and so on. Once somebody starts, many little children will follow. So while we sing the whole carol, or indeed while the story is being told, we've got something that little people can be doing that's very active, that is play-based, which can be great delight. And we just need to adapt it very slightly. And we've got something that's very inclusive for little people. And then some of these are things that can be done in the pew. Somebody mentioned in the chat the idea of supplying a tray of things to do that can be put where children are sitting with their parents. And this might be supremely important for this time when they're not allowed to gather in creches and children's groups. So it means somebody creating enough trays each week for a particular family. But again, we've the same kind of thing, the card star shapes and some sequins or glitter or shiny paper. The Hunt the Stars, again, a packet of silver stars with hundreds of stars in. You could just fill the church with them, and families with little children could creep around and find the stars while something is happening that they can't really engage with. That's about diversity, isn't it? And about differentiation. So maybe not every part of worship can be inclusive for everybody, but then you need to provide a different activity for some people at some times. Maybe you could send the adults to look for the stars while the children listen to a children's story, who knows. And then pray with stars. I love this idea, so that you supply some small paper stars, and the resources supply a template, and then you fold in all the points into the center. And if you put those in a tray of water, they will unfold. So during a normal prayer time where maybe prayers are being intercession prayers or prayers of adoration, this is simply a distraction activity if you want to look at it in a negative sort of way, or a wonder activity if you want to look at it in a positive sort of way.